have all the people here in a way, we have all the characters, we have the full story of how America was crafted on the ground, all the messy details. And so when you just look at an artwork on its own, it can tell you a lot and it's very beautiful. But when you look at an artwork in the context in which it was made, I think you just get a lot bigger, richer picture of how that art came about, what it means. The context is kind of everything. We have a really unique opportunity in historic house museums to show that whole big household, the whole big range of people that made the country happen.
My goal as a historian, and especially one who focuses on New York State, is really to inspire people to ask more questions. I want people to read about race relations and gender relations, and to think about how that may have looked and felt in, say, 1820 in their own community. And then think about what our values are today about family and economic success or education, even about our neighbors. And in looking at the past, say, oh, these aren't players who are so disconnected from our same values today. They're people who are living in their time with the practice of slavery in part of the country, with emancipation rolling out really unevenly in other parts of the country, with race relations really being hardened into a racial hierarchy during this period, with indigenous populations all over the state still moving in and moving through and asking and demanding for some respect, and women saying, wait, we're doing a lot of work here, right? We are really the backbone of American families regardless of what your racial or ethnic background is, right? And so I want people to start to ask those questions and say, well, a person like me, my story is just as relevant as the next story, and I want to know how mine and someone else's connect in, say, 1834.
One thing is like always being kind of open to critical interpretations and remaining critical too, understanding that these like historic figures can be incredibly important historically, but also fallible, and I think important to hold our historic figures to the moral standards of today also. I mean, and reckoning with that history for sure. Yeah, and I think it's also sourcing your information and knowledge from those groups of people who were most affected by some of these courses of history. That really gives you the kind of full-bodied view of the movement and what it implied and how it's affected us. Because for a very long time, of course, art history has been this sort of like imperial and colonial and mainly white discipline, and it's the only way that we kind of break out of that is the inclusivity of like other perspectives and voices too. The more, the merrier, I think. The more perspective and the more critical lenses, the better, and we're seeing that now.
In what ways do we have things in common with others? How do we find that? And then how do we present it so people can see that there's a longer history in the United States to not only omitting some people's stories, but also if we start to put them into place, we can better understand the world we live in today. We can start to trace back some of those kind of isms that everybody's challenged with, and we can also find ways that people work together in the past that haven't been unearthed yet.
We survived. My ancestors survived so that I can sit here. And parents survived so they could raise their children. People went underground, hid their language and hid their religion so they could secretly pass it on. So tradition still lived. It just lived underground. And because of that, because of those brave people who held on to language, religion, culture, all of that, we're able to still see remnants of it today. So we survived.
I'm hoping that we have shown people that the history has a lot to tell us about today. And I'm hoping that people come away with a feeling that they too have agency in their world. Thomas Cole tried to change the world with his paintings. He tried to change people's hearts. And one person can make a really big impact on the world. Every person has that opportunity, whether it's through art, writing, just being a person in the world, interacting. I think I feel that inspiration when I'm here, that I have the ability to go out into the world and make a change in the world, as I hope that everyone else feels too.
Sponsored in part by the Albany Med Health System and by Robert and Doris Fisher Malasardi.